So, good evening, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you for joining us here for the So You Want to Start a Nonprofit program. I am Angela Beard, and I'm with the Fundraising Academy at City University, which is a big mouthful. We are chamber members because before the pandemic, we had a campus in Renton, and that's right now not operating because everybody's still kind of up in limbo, but I'm still a member and I'm involved with the Renton Area Nonprofits United, RANU, which is a nonprofit support group, I guess you would call us, that meets once a month through the chamber. And I was just telling Erica, do a lot of chatting about, there's a presentation, there's a member spotlight, and then we kind of share what we're doing, what we need. Can someone help me with this? Does anybody know about that, etc. It's a good little group. So I agreed to do this series for Diane because I think it's super important. A little bit more about me, and maybe you'll know why. First, excuse me, I tend to jump around a little. The Fundraising Academy's mission statement is to help nonprofits significantly increase their fundraising capabilities and the impact they have in their communities. And I'm going to stop right there because all the rest about curriculum is as important as why we're in business. So I get paid to go out and teach people how to raise money and how to start a nonprofit, kind of about boards. That's my job. So if any of you should find a need for something like we're going to have tonight, or really any topic about fundraising or nonprofits, feel free to reach out because I will do that for you for free. Yes, I did say free. Just a little bit more about me. Before I went into academia, I was a nonprofit fundraiser for more than 20 years. Yikes. I started as a grant writer and then went on to be director of development and campaigns, did 2 capital campaigns. Then I went back to school because I'm insane. And once I got my PhD, I got to start teaching. So I started teaching at Seattle U in 2013, which is coming up on 10 years. Yikes. And I have published, I have a couple of graduate degrees that were were more about expensive than really teaching me. Well, I learned a lot, but we won't go there about the state of higher education in this country. Hopefully it doesn't matter to you and yours. So let's roll with this presentation. Oh, and a few just kind of, I hate to say ground rules because rules is more formal than I usually operate, but again, questions at any time. Feel free to unmute yourself, type in the chat. Folks in person at the chamber work with Kevin, or I don't know, Kevin, if they can come up and just shout into your microphone. But hey, I'm okay with it if you are.
I'll give that access.
The slides will be sent out to everybody who registered, as will a recording. I know we're recording, and I know the link's going to be available. So that will also be sent out to you guys as soon as it's ready. My contact information is at the end, like I said, in case any of you do have follow-up questions, want to bounce ideas off someone, want me to come and talk to your organization or your board or whatever about fundraising, let me know. And that, like I said, that ends the quasi sales pitch because it is free for you. So tonight I'd like you to take away these things. We're going to go over some of the myths about running a nonprofit, and there are many. Then we're going to methodically go through the 2 steps you need to go through to make your own decision about whether or not you want to start one and what to expect. Okay, what to expect, and then doing your homework about your proposed nonprofit, the programs you're going to offer, the folks in the community that you plan to serve, and make sure that you have the right solution. Okay, and we'll talk about a couple of alternatives to incorporating, and then we'll have a Q&A. Okay, anything that I'm not covering that you guys would like me to? Does it all sound pretty okay? What you expected to get out of it, etc.? Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention the one of the most important things is that I have a Chihuahua and I'm at home. So every once in a while she does make a guest appearance, and I apologize in advance for that, but I can't help it. When she wants puppy love, she wants puppy love. So I'll kick her off and we'll go on. But just so you aren't startled or anything, let's roll. In the chat, if you would, could you let me know A, B, C, or D? I want to start a nonprofit to address a community problem or need, have a more meaningful career, be able to provide myself employment and an eventually, oh, the photos are in the way. It's not high salary, or transition out of my current job. And of course, if these aren't any of your reasons and you have an additional one, by all means, feel free to type it on in there. What's driving what's motivating you? All right. So we've got lots of A's, some B's, A and B, fabulous. Create career opportunities for others, that's a good one. Great. Well, I'm pleased that, quite honestly, I am pleased that no one has chosen C or D, because some people do, and they're the ones that really kind of don't understand what working in nonprofits is all about. So what are some of the myths about nonprofits? First one, nonprofit work is easy and flexible. We kind of work 2 or 3 hours a day. We come in at 10 and leave at 2. This is not accurate. Okay, nonprofit work is just as difficult and time consuming and requires as much training, as you can see from my own personal resume, as does the for-profit sector. It's not true that nonprofit management is not the same quality as a for-profit. It is. It's quite rigorous. And nonprofits are less efficient, innovative, or business-minded than for-profits. Who believes that, or who's heard that, or what do y'all think about that? Okay, Charles and Sue, great. You're also on the A and B train. Good to know. Does anybody encounter that myth in their lives, or is it one you hold yourself? No judging here, because that's why we're having this conversation. Oh, there's a lot of misunderstandings about nonprofits because, well, first of all, our country is set up that money and monetization are the top indicators of success. How much money do you make? How profitable are you, etc. And so an organization that sets out to do something else is kind of looked down on. Let's be frank, right? And then the truth of that is that nonprofits can run a profit, or what we call a surplus. What we cannot do, and we'll get to that when we talk about incorporating, is distribute it to owners. First of all, there are no owners. Second of all, distributing any surplus of revenues over expenses goes against the reasons that we incorporate to begin with, which is to serve the community. So anything we earn over and above our expenses goes back into the organization. Okay, so it is not true that a nonprofit has to break even or even lose money. No, we're strongly encouraged to have a surplus. So if that's been clouding your thinking, dismiss that notion. It's couldn't be less true. Passion and vision are all you need to run a nonprofit. Anyone think this is so, or seen a nonprofit, or met people who think that that's enough to sustain an organization? Again, not judging, just wanting y'all to be the best.
It's definitely not all you need to run a nonprofit.
It is not all that you need. It's
great to have it, but
yeah, it's
You need
very
to have it,
important.
but yeah,
Yeah,
not all
you need
right.
to have it because you won't, and now we come back to nonprofit work being easy and flexible. You need that passion and vision when you're working 60 hours a week, or dealing with people that break your heart or animals or, seeing all kinds of suffering. You need that passion, but it is not enough to run a nonprofit. You need business sense or the money to hire someone who does. You need to be organized. You need to be compliant with a lot of legal, I won't say restrictions, requirements is a better way of putting it. So you should be fired up, but it's not enough. All right. Any questions about that before we move on? Okay. A note on this, which maybe I should have included in the slides, is that nonprofit management is now becoming very institutionalized. And by that, what I mean is when I was a young person, scared of that, there were no degrees in nonprofit management. Nothing was formally taught. You fell into it and learned by doing. Now you can get undergraduate degrees, you can get master's degrees in nonprofit management. There are all kinds of trainings out there in specifics like nonprofit social media, nonprofit marketing, nonprofit fundraising, of course, that's my job. So, some of the folks you see running these charity organizations have gone to school intentionally to prepare themselves for that kind of career. And they've, worked just as hard as the CPA or the lawyer or whatever that we respect in the MBA in this community, in our society. So just know that, right? Moving on, how do nonprofits come to be? Well, this is another thing we need to go through very carefully, because I was saying to Erica before when we were chatting that a lot of people, I've been teaching for quite some time, and I've had students come to me and say, I really care about kids having a daycare for special needs children. And I'm very passionate about this. I've seen what happens in my own family without one. I'm going to start a nonprofit and write a few grants, and we'll get some big checks and be great and move on. No, that unfortunately does not work that way. How do nonprofits come to be? This is a general path. There isn't a single one that's correct or universal, but just know that this is the general way that nonprofits are created. A need is seen in the community. And by a need, we mean there's a problem that needs addressing. You guys know them all: disease, hunger, homelessness, immigration rights, cancer. And then there are situations where we're looking at improvement of life in our community, like education or the arts, right? So a group of individuals, or just one individual, happens quite frequently, decides to address it. And they get together, and this is the kitchen table napkin scenario, and spend a couple of years organizing and planning, starting the nonprofit, applying to incorporate, while relying on their own resources and contributions from family and friends. Okay. And almost universally, the first step is to incorporate as a nonprofit, as a 501c3. They are corporations, just tax-exempt corporations. And you do have to go through steps with the IRS and the Secretary of State in Washington. For us, of course, I think everyone here is from Washington, or whatever state you choose to incorporate in. Once you get that exempt status, and we'll talk more about this in detail, you can begin to seek funding and expand your services. But the first couple of years is a lot of work that is not the glamour. Well, glamorous isn't the right word, but not the work of your heart, the passion that you're following to serve people, animals, the environment, or whatever. It's administrative, legal, financial tasks that are involved in getting your organization off the ground. All right. Any questions before we go on this one? All right. Let's talk a little bit more about incorporation. Okay. So today I'm discussing 501c3 organizations, and those are public charities, all right? There are a number of other ways that organizations incorporate as a nonprofit. Rotary is a nonprofit, for example, or the Elks Club or the Lions Club. They're under a different, they're 501c4s membership organizations, okay? Private foundations like the Gates Foundation, they incorporate as nonprofits so that gifts to their foundation can be tax deductible, but they do not offer services to the public. They are 501c9s. Okay, so there are a number of classifications. We're talking about public charities that exist, and I'm jumping on to the next one, public charities that operate for exempt purposes. Charitable, religious, education, scientific, I think cultural should be in there, I must have left it out, or literary. And those are what we typically think of as nonprofits, okay? Youth Care, the YWCA, the American Red Cross, the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, Girl Scouts, the University of Washington. Well, the University of Washington is a state institution as well, so they are a little bit different. Seattle University, Seattle Repertory Theater, all those are 501c3 organizations set up to operate for exempt purposes, okay? Now that exempt status means, jumping down to the third bullet, the organization.
Buenas tardes.
Yeah. Was there a question? Okay. 501c3 status means the organization is exempt from corporate taxes. They don't pay sales tax. They don't pay property tax. They don't pay B&O or whatever for-profit corporations pay. 501c3 means that an organization is able to accept and offer tax deduction for contributions and grants. So at the beginning, when you're not incorporated, and I think I talk about this later on, it's important to be transparent with anybody that makes a donation to your organization that they will not get a tax deduction unless your application to the IRS is successful, and then it can be offered retroactively. So in a very simple example, you start up your nonprofit on January 1st. You apply for incorporation. Oh, yes, Erica.
I just had a quick question, and
Sure.
I probably, I don't know, you might say it after this, but usually on an average, how long does it take to get 501(c)(3) status?
It takes 6 to 9 months.
Oh, 6 to 9 months. Okay.
Yeah. So coming back to our example, so you decide on January 1 that you are going to launch your nonprofit. You submit your tax exempt application. It winds its way through the IRS. And in the meantime, friends and concerned community members and, you know, all kinds of different people offer you financial support. You receive your successful tax ID in June. This is all for discussion purposes. Any gifts that those folks made between January and June, they may now take a tax deduction on, okay? You fail to get your IRS tax exempt status, and half the applications do fail, then those folks don't get any deduction, all right? Obviously, that's not what we want to see happen, but it's important to be transparent with your donors before you're incorporated that it could go either way, all right? So if someone's expecting a big tax deduction at the end of the year, they need to know it may or may not come through. Like I said already, a 501c3 status does not mean you cannot have a surplus. You may have a surplus of revenue over expenses. You're encouraged to do so. It just may not benefit individuals, all right? It may not benefit your board, for example. Your board are volunteers, they work for free, not like directors on a for-profit board, okay? You may pay your staff when you're at that point a reasonable salary. make sure it's reasonable, right? Because if it's not, that's the IRS can come in and say, you know, you're paying your founder $5 million a year, and that's really unreasonable, that you're no longer operating as a charity. Yoink, there goes your nonprofit status. So you need to look at, you know, salary studies, compensation, etc. But that doesn't mean everyone has to work for free. You may pay employees. In the US, there are 1.5 million nonprofits. Washington State has 30,000. In Washington State, 4,000 nonprofits start a year. Okay, so we'll get to it in a minute, but that's why it's important to do your market research and make sure that the services and the community you're serving are, you know, are value added, that there's not somebody else doing the same work. Okay. The IRS gets, like I said, 75,000 applications a year to incorporate as for 501c3s. Only half are accepted. So know that, and most of them are rejected for some kind of, you know, they haven't met the requirements for setting up a nonprofit, which we'll talk about at the next session. For example, they don't have a board, or they haven't written their bylaws. And some of them are rejected because the IRS does not believe that they can deliver on the exempt purpose that they say they are going to chase. I mean, you have to provide biographies and your credentials and all that kind of stuff. And if you say you want to start a school for special needs children, but your background is in, you know, I don't know, corporate finance, bless you for trying, but it's going to raise questions as to how you're going to be able to do this, do the work, right? Or who are you going to hire or whatever. So it's not a slam dunk. You have 50% chance of succeeding. Know that going in so you can be transparent with your donors. Questions yet?
I had a question.
Yeah.
What would you say, if you know, what are like the main reasons of why the applications are not accepted, and do people resubmit after that? Like,
yes, the main reasons are, like I said, administrative. Someone either fills out the application incorrectly, doesn't include the right, either doesn't have or does not include the correct documentation. So just jumping ahead a little bit, to incorporate as a nonprofit, you have to have bylaws. Bylaws are how your organization operates, what the board does, how it's structured, when will you have members or not, will you have an annual meeting, and who gets to vote. And it's kind of all the boring but technical important stuff that lay the foundation for how your organization is going to operate. And you have to have a board. You have to have a board of 3 people who are not related, that and an officer structure. You need a president, you need a vice president, and a secretary at a minimum, right? You have to provide all kinds of documentation. You have to provide the documents I just talked about, and you have to have a board list and a place of business, and you have to you know, like submit a budget and a fundraising plan. And a lot of people don't have that. They're not ready. They didn't know it was required. They, you know, they don't have, they aren't quite there yet. Their passion is exceeding their experience. And so that's the big reason that a lot of folks are turned down. Yes, Kevin.
Yes, Sue has a question.
Sure.
Hi there. So
Hi.
if it's written into the bylaws, can a board member get paid a salary?
No. It is almost,
I thought you could have,
no, board members are always volunteer, because there is that risk, and even appearances, right? If they're going to be paid a salary, they should be an employee. The board needs to be impartial. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I know we keep walking over each other.
No, it's hard.
Okay, no, I was just
Zoom, right.
No, I was just curious because, you know, like our situation, we cannot afford to hire employees right now. So we have one board member that, probably puts in 60 hours a week and another one that puts in 40 hours a week
Yeah,
and for free.
I know. And that's,
Just,
I don't mean to be saying, tough noogies, but essentially that's what happens. And
yeah, no, that's
yeah. And when the
the way
organization,
we understood it.
okay, well, when the organization gets the money, you may consider hiring one of those folks as your first executive director. They'll know the lay of the land
Yeah,
better than anybody
exactly.
else, and yeah. But no, board members cannot be paid. They have to remain impartial. They have to represent the community. They can't have any skin in the game whatsoever. That might even offer the appearance of impropriety or a conflict of interest or something like that. Even the perception, right? So does that answer that question for everybody? I have
Yeah, that's it.
And Angela, there's another question in the chat box from
Yeah,
Vanessa. I'll read
I was just noticing that I'm gonna read it out. If our organization have a fiscal sponsor, and that's one of the alternatives we'll get to, and the donor makes a donation to our fiscal sponsor and they are 501c3 already. Yes. That is correct. The donor says the donor designates it to your nonprofit. Yes, the donor can receive a tax deduction because they have that fiscal umbrella, that fiscal sponsor that is operating as their conduit, if you will, as their 501c3 conduit. Does that answer your question, Vanessa?
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. All right. Erica, are you raising your hand or are you stretching?
I was raising my hand, but then I was like, I'll wait, because
Okay,
and fiscal sponsors is probably later on down the line.
it is. It
So
is.
I'll wait.
Okay, well then let's go ahead. Oh, I see another hand up. Kevin?
It must have been from before.
Yeah, I
Okay,
don't think he put his hand down.
okay, then let me move on to the next slide. Okay, wait a minute. Am I going backwards? Okay. Running a nonprofit is hard work in a business. We kind of established that when we went through the myths, right? So just to reiterate, your first couple of years are going to be about compliance, and that's with the state and the IRS. Meetings, I would like to know how many of your two board members, how much time they spend in of the 40 and 60 hours a week are meetings, because you're meeting about everything. How's this going to work? How are we going to, you got to write your bylaws. You've got to figure out the programming, lots of time with that, and fundraising. Even though you aren't exempt quite right away at the beginning, you got to have money for a space. You've got to have money for, even if you're entirely volunteer run, you still got to you need supplies for your services. You need, you need stuff to operate. So providing the programs or services of the organization is on top of this, okay? On top of this administrative and fundraising work. So the 60 and 40 hours a week does not surprise me in the slightest. And, once you're in that position of having a small board, you want to start reaching out and making connections in the community to folks that want to help you. It takes a village and all that, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and very little of it, if any, is paid. So have that in your mind when you go forward in this thing. You are not going to be able to do it alone, and you should not and cannot legally, if you want to incorporate. You need a board of at least 3. All right. Is this clear to everybody, or is there anything that's not? Are you disappointed that you aren't going to be able to jump right into providing services? How does that feel? Is it something you expected? I don't mean to be all doom and gloom. You are, of course, you're in business to deliver services, right? To serve the community, to make a difference in people's lives or animals' lives or the environment's lives or whatever. But the work has to happen in conjunction with the administrative and financial stuff. the elves and fairies do not come in the night and do your paperwork for you and bring you money, right? Erica?
I knew it was gonna be hard work, but I actually didn't think it was gonna be that long before you could really just be up and start doing what it is that you're compassionate to do. So
You know,
a little different for me.
you will start doing the work in here. I shouldn't, again, don't, this is on top of the work, okay? So you're doing both. The IRS schedule of 6 to 9 months is what they tell you to expect, but I've known it to happen faster. I've known it to happen in 6 weeks to 2 months, but we're in a pandemic, they're all insane. So I don't want, I'd rather be conservative in my expectations than optimistic for this one. Yeah, if I'm not being 100% clear, you are also starting the work. You're acquiring a facility, you are, building partnerships with other people in the community. They're going to help you serve the population that you've targeted. You're getting supplies, you're getting staff or volunteers to help you. Yeah, it's a lot of work. So the first year or two, this is your focus, but it is not all you are doing. You are starting the work as well. Is that clear to everybody? Erica, do you have your hand up again, or is it left?
Yeah, I do. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm
No,
gonna
it's
be
fine.
one of those people that have a lot of questions.
If you have a
so please,
question,
you guys
somebody else
forgive me.
probably has it too. So go
You
ahead.
guys forgive me, but you said require a place. So you definitely have to have a facility, a little office space or something other than your home, correct?
Well, yes and no. I mean,
No? Okay.
obviously it depends on the type of nonprofit you're going to be, right? If you're going to be a homeless shelter, you have to have a shelter. I mean, it's just kind of like, you also have to put in your bylaws, the place I forget if there's a technical name for it, but basically the place where notices and legal documents can be sent. So you have to identify a place of business. Excuse me. Now, there's no reason that can't be your home, but you can't, you have to identify something. And even if you're working out of your garage, which, they joke, a lot of nonprofits started in a basement or a garage, and it's true, you just have to be able to have some place to put on your bylaws and all your application for incorporation, et cetera. If there are some nonprofits that work entirely remotely, and they have, like, say, organizations, this is an example off the top of my head, an organization that sends artists into the public schools. Well, the school is a facility, right? And the artists and the staff work remotely from home. So they don't have an office per se, and their business is done in the school's facility. So that's a situation where you just still need some place to identify, post office box, your home address, someplace that, you can receive documents and stuff from the IRS and stuff from the state and your bills and all the stuff that go into running a business, right? Does that make sense? See, we have something in the chat. Let's see. A PO box, yes, as I just mentioned, that does work too. Yeah, lots of nonprofits have them. Erica. Yes. No? Go on? Okay. All right. Now we get into dealing with the community. And this is, again, all part of your getting off the ground and getting running. Nonprofits exist to benefit the community. Okay, we've established that pretty much. They do not exist to benefit any one individual or group of individuals. It's really important to have strong relationships with key community members. Now, who do we think some of these key community members might be? Ideas. You need expertise.
Yeah.
You need to know who's funding your area of work. You need to know how your government officials stand on your area of work quite frequently. You might enter into one of your key community members may be indeed a fiscal sponsor. There are all kinds of partnerships that you are going to want to have and start working on and to have in place when you decide to go forward. All right. You need a board. In the beginning, and I won't go into the whole life cycle of a board, but in the beginning, the board pretty much is the organization. All right. They make all the key decisions. Decisions are not made by a single person. And this is also something that folks who come to me wanting to start a nonprofit don't always understand. We'll talk about it on the next slide. But your board makes decisions, not you, even if you're the founder, right? It's a consensus operation, and that's, it's supposed to be, again, representative of the community so that many voices are heard. The board is the legal entity for a nonprofit. They are fiscally responsible for anything that happens. Let's see, you will probably need volunteers. If you are meeting a real community need, you attract people by attracting people. I'll tell you, you probably already know, you will be out there at Rotary, and you will be at the chamber, and you will be at the association of whoever's, doing your work in the community. For example, there's a network of food banks that meets once a month. You're going to go anywhere you can to talk about your nonprofit and try to garner support for it, be it financial or volunteers. You will attract people, okay, that want to help, well, either financially or through their services. You need these folks, again, to keep you from working 100 hours a week. And because that's what, again, nonprofit is all about. It's about involving the community and solving the problem. And they will do the work in the short term, guided by you, while you build up funds to hire staff. Does that make sense? And most nonprofits don't stop using volunteers. There's both a philosophical reason for wanting to engage community members, to engage the community, and bandwidth. We always want to do more. There are always more people to serve, right? Problem rarely 100% goes away. So no matter how big of a staff we have, there's always more that can be done. And our volunteers help us to close that gap. Does that make sense to everybody? Very important role that volunteers play. Control. This is a big thing to consider when you think about starting a nonprofit. How much control do you want or need to do this work? If it's important to you, you might want to consider a format other than a nonprofit 501c3. With a nonprofit, you give up control in two ways. I'm just reading this straight out. To your board of directors, a group of people who are the legal decision makers, partnering with the executive director, not one or two individuals or founders. You give it up right away when you form your board, okay? Now, they listen to you. They generally follow your advice, having been an executive director myself. But in the end, the buck stops there. So they want to be involved and informed of what's going on in the organization. Big decisions and policies go to them at all times. It is not the person that starts the nonprofit. And that's a huge misconception that I run into all the time. People think it's like their own business. No, no. This is not like a for-profit business that you would start. This is a community-driven organization, okay? And again, here we come back to, it's for the public good. It cannot benefit any individual people or be controlled for the benefit of any individual people. And that has become a unfortunate problem with some nonprofits that have raised pretty significant scandals by overpaying themselves, embezzlement, which is also a crime, use of company facilities for personal things. Yeah, that any whiff of that is just not okay, right? So if that's what you're expecting, some of those perks, you might want to take some time to reflect on how realistic that's going to be. Questions? Yeah. Vanessa,
How long the board of directors can be for 1 year or for how long it's supposed to be?
that's part of what you decide when you create your bylaws. All right. And there are boards that have any number of 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year terms. Some boards do not have term limits, what they're called. And there's always a debate about that as to, are term limits a good thing or a bad thing? Do we want to have board members for 15 or 20 years? That's what you'll get to decide at your organization, right? And again, that's part of all these meetings and discussions I'm talking about when you decide how you're going to run. And it goes into your bylaws, and then it's policy. Then that's the way it operates unless you decide to change your bylaws. The most typical I've seen is 3 years, but that's by no means universal. It can be a year. It's kind of short. The board member is going to spend a year just learning about the organization.
Okay.
So yeah, it is up to you.
Okay. Another question. Now, talking about the board of members, for example, we are working with Hispanic women,
Mhm.
and sometimes we can have board members that also they can give some workshops to our organization. It is possible that they do workshops to us, or they need to do it by free. We can pay to them.
Someone who's on your board.
Yeah, we don't have a board yet, but we are thinking
Uh-huh.
especially leading our community, and maybe if sometimes they can provide some workshops to us.
Right. Well, that I can't answer 100% thoroughly on that. The short answer is that it's really important for a board not to
Be involved.
have any conflict of interest, even perception wise. Okay. So what I know that if you are a board member and you want to provide services to the nonprofit and expect to get paid, you at least have to disclose your relationship with the firm that you are working with. And in some cases, it'll just being a board member will disqualify you from being able to provide those services. I'm not 100% certain. The thing to be aware of is that they do need to be transparent.
Mhm.
And folks, for those of you who are interested in finding continue to explore that, there's a great nonprofit in Seattle called Communities Rising, and they are legal consultants. They know nonprofit law. So this would be a great question for them. And Vanessa, I'm gonna now, because I'm curious, I'm going to Communities Rising.
Yeah, they're very good also.
They hold workshops about setting up a nonprofit and all kinds of legal aspects, HR and, unions and all the things you need to know about to stay compliant. So check them out. I'm going to look at that, research that question because I'd like to know more. And I will include my answer in the resources that you're going to be sent, these slides and the recording. Does that work?
Yeah,
There was a
perfect.
question about elections.
Yep. There we go.
Let's see. Yes, Erica, you can and do have elections. Board members are nominated, and are you talking about, well, the board elects its own officers, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. And then, yes, board members do vote on new board members to join. And that, again, is set up in your bylaws, how it has to work, how often it has to happen, what the process is for recruitment, etc. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving on, because I think I'm falling behind because y'all are so interesting. All right, so we've talked about this, so I'm just going to skip over the slide or cruise. It is an expectation to bring in more revenue than you spend in a nonprofit. It's called a surplus. This can be set aside for cash reserves, for a maintenance fund, to expand your services, anything that goes back into the organization and makes it stronger and builds its capacity. All right. What you cannot do, again, is have any individual benefit. We talked about employees being paid salaries. They can be. And if you expect to start a nonprofit and raising money to pay yourself all of the surplus like you would as a for-profit owner, no, no, no. That jeopardizes your exempt status. It's illegal, and it doesn't work that way. So if that's in the back of your head, you need to do a check on what you expect and can live with, okay? Something else that bothers some folks when they go into the nonprofit are the higher standards for public scrutiny and transparency, okay? Nonprofits receive tax exemptions that total into the billions of dollars every year. And as such, we are expected to show that we've earned it, that we're not, scamming the public, if you will. So there's a lot of transparency in nonprofits. You've got to be able to, we file returns with the IRS, even though we don't pay taxes. We file returns that are called 990 PF, or 990 documents. And those are very comprehensive about your operation, okay? You report your financial results, you report what you accomplished towards your mission in the past year. You list your board. There are all kinds of, it's several pages long, and that is publicly available. All right. So anyone, and here's another thing for you to know. Anyone, you, me, anybody on the street can go to the internet and look up the 990 for a particular nonprofit. Okay. And that's in an organization called GuideStar. I'm going to put this in the chat. You do have to have a free account, so you do have to sign up, but you can look up 990s, and that'll give you an idea. And they can be very helpful when you are setting up your nonprofit. You can go and look at someone who's in a business similar to yours and say, okay, what expenses do they have? And they're listed out. All right. And then you'll see, oh, okay, they pay consultants, and they pay for supplies, and they pay for a little bit of travel, probably for mileage, and they don't have a facility because there's no rent expense. You can analyze it. It'll help you to make your own plan, right? The executive salaries are listed in the 990. So if you have a problem with anyone knowing how much money you earn as a CEO or one of the highest paid employees, the top 5 have to be listed. Don't go into nonprofits, because that's part of the deal, okay? Also, organizations of a certain size in Washington State, it's a 3 million over 3-year revenue average. And those who receive a target level of public funding, and by that, it's $750,000 from the federal government, must be audited. It's required. So an auditor will come in, you have to pay them to go over your books and your internal controls and make sure that everything you say you are doing, you are in fact doing, okay? And it is required. There's no getting around it. So if you're not prepared to deal with that, maybe consider another way of helping the community. And we'll talk about those at the end. Any questions on this public scrutiny piece? Okay. So what's next? Those are the things that you personally, as an individual, need to think about when you decide or not to head into this nonprofit business, okay? Now, at the next session on November 22nd, I believe it is, we will go over the step-by-step as to how a nonprofit is set up. This is going to give you an idea of what that means. So you can say, oh, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to have to do X, Y, and Z. Or you can say, yeah, I can manage this. I can hire someone to do it, whatever, right? I am going to take just 30 seconds because I need a drink of water. So excuse me while I grab a can of La Croix. If you want to go ahead and refresh yourselves, we'll take a little 30-second break. Since the pandemic started and I've been working remotely, I don't talk very much during the day, right? And so when I teach or present, I start to get growly after about an hour. So yeah, we're heading in that way. Sorry about that. It shouldn't affect the quality of the information though. Okay. All right, let's move on. We've talked about the things you have to consider personally that work with your style, your expectations. Now let's talk about what the technical, if you will, logistical type requirements are. All right. So the first thing you need to do, and none of this, by the way, is really sequential. It's kind of all happening at once. So before you go down the incorporation path, you need to investigate if your idea, if your proposed nonprofit is the right solution for the community. Okay. And it also goes hand in hand with some of those partnerships that we just talked about. If you want to start a homeless shelter in a city that doesn't have one, for example, homelessness is a big hot button of mine, so I use it a lot. You're going to want to reach out to homeless shelters in other communities and say, hey, I want to help the people of community X by operating a homeless shelter. There's a big problem there. We see people on the streets, etc. What is it going to take? What do I need to know? And you build those relationships to have people to mentor you, to advise, and you, in the course of doing that, or I should say, in the course of conducting a needs analysis, you'll meet those people. You'll ask them for coffee, whatever. Conducting a needs analysis answers these questions: who is doing the same or similar work in the community I am proposing to serve? Okay. So is there someone else in Renton or Kent or Bellevue or wherever you want, Enumclaw, I don't know, who is doing the work that you're doing? Okay. And if there is, the answer is yes. The second question: will my proposed nonprofit add to or improve their services or duplicate them? Let's take an example again from homelessness. There are lots of homeless shelters in Seattle, right? There's one downtown, DESC, Downtown Emergency Services Center. There's one out in North Seattle. Well, they have buildings all over the place, but there's North Seattle is youth care, okay? Now, both of these nonprofits serve people experiencing homelessness. What's the difference between the two of them? You might ask, why do we need so many homeless shelters? Well, DESC downtown focuses on people who are experiencing mental illness. Okay. Youth care up they're in the University District with facilities all over, focuses on homeless youth, in particular LGBTQ, who have been kicked out of their houses because their parents aren't, because they have been. We won't go there. So you see what I mean? They're both shelters, but they add to the services available in the community by focusing on a specific community or need. All right. Could say the same about the arts. I used to have to talk about Pacific Northwest Ballet when I worked there and why, how we were meeting a community need. Well, we're the only ballet company in the city of Seattle. All right. So if someone wants to go to a ballet performance, we're it. And that's why we needed to be, supported, because ballet changes the quality of life. It raises it in the community. It offers vocational opportunities for kids. I won't get into that argument, but you what's your niche, right? What's your value proposition? That's what this question is about. Okay. What is the need for our services? Okay. Coming back again to our simple example of homelessness. Well, there's a need for homeless services because people are sleeping on the streets. Not everyone in this community is housed. It's a straightforward one, right? And how is it not being met? Well, there aren't enough shelters. There aren't enough resources for people that need housing. Housing costs have gone way up. People can't afford to live all the time. That's how you build your case. That we'll talk about in lesson 3, your case for why you should be in business, your case for why you deserve support, okay? Knowing what the problem is and what the gap is in services. Questions? Okay, yeah, pay real close attention to this, folks, because again, that passion for your mission, that passion for your cause will sometimes lead you to overlook this kind of thing, right? Well, everybody knows that, that the community needs what I want to do. Well, do they? Check it out. Have it verified. Don't just rely on your own conviction to say, yeah, I'm going to go forward. All right. Planning. So we need a couple of plans. An organizing plan is information about your idea and how you plan to implement it. This is the heart and soul, the meat of the business, right? How am I going to serve homeless people on the 4th of July? How am I going to offer veterinary care to homeless folks on the street who have pets? How am I going to make sure that the arts are accessible to people of all abilities? What's my plan? What am I going to do? And then a business plan, which if you are in business, you know what that is, that talks about your goals, how you'll achieve them, your target population, how your nonprofit will serve the community, which is drawn from your organizing plan, right? How the organization will be run. Will you have, who's on your board, who's your CEO? Are you, a single CEO? Are you joint? Are you, arts groups, for example, have 2. An artistic director and an executive director that both report to the board. There are nonprofits that have communal leadership. There are all kinds of ways to run a nonprofit, right? And how the agency will be funded. We in fundraising readiness, number 3 of this series, we do talk a lot about that. What is out there, who's giving money and to whom, how different sectors are funded, social services or human services are funded in a much different way than is education, right? We'll talk about earned income versus contributed income, passive income, and what is appropriate to think that you can achieve as you're starting up and as you grow. Is this clear to everybody? Again, that you really need to put in the work to develop a plan for your organization. Okay, great. Questions yet? Erica?
Will there be a class on the business plan to kind of help people? Will there be something like that?
There will be a class on half of it.
Half of it, okay.
And by that, I mean, I personally am not a programmer. I do not deliver services. I never have. I don't know how to exactly plan for, what you're thinking about doing. What I know how to do is the half that's administrative. Okay. So you tell me you want to serve homeless people on the 4th of July, and I can sit down and say, okay, you can expect these kind of folks will be interested in giving to you, and this is what your startup cost might be. And that's my gig. Telling you how to deliver the services is not.
Right.
So does that help?
Yeah, I was just wondering because I know of an organization that actually helps with the business plan part. So I didn't know if I should go that way to do that part of it, and just, and if you guys were already going to do it, then that's fine.
At this point, I'll be doing it, but only for, it's an hour,
just
right?
Just kind of touching on it. Okay, got it.
I'm cramming a lot into an hour. So if you've got some other sources, by all means, take advantage of them.
I will. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Other questions before we go on? Was I supposed to be done at 7:30, Kevin?
Yes, but that's okay because it looks like we still have 12 participants.
Okay, well, if you folks don't mind going over a little, I'm happy to stay. Financing. Do we have a solid plan for financing the organization during startup and in the future? So what does that say to you? There are 3 things going on in that sentence, that question. Startup, before you're incorporated and you can accept tax-deductible donations. after incorporation, and in the future as you grow, how are you going to remain sustainable? Now, you're not going to have the answers for all this right away as a startup. There's no way you can see too far into the future, right? You don't even know if you'll make it past a year or so. But you've got to be thinking about sustainability, all right? And just let me give an example of that. Again, the best meaning folks who want to follow their passion, start up a nonprofit and think, yeah, I talked with a funder and they said they would be interested in our program. So I'm pretty sure we'll get a $50,000 grant from them and we can get going. And I'm kind of like, well, what happens when the grant goes away? Oh, well, I never thought of that. Okay. You need to prepare yourself to start thinking about financing and sustainability. So again, with the homeless shelter example. So I decided I want to start a homeless shelter. Okay. There's a need in the community. There's nothing where I live. It's needed. During startup, as we've discussed, I'm going to go to my friends and family who know I care a lot about homelessness and say, hey, look, can you give me $100? Hopefully I'll be incorporated within 6 or 9 months and I can give you a tax deduction for your donation. And since they're friends and family, they're prepared to help you and even lose the money if it doesn't work out. Okay. As a homeless shelter, and because I'm a professional in this business, and you will be too by the time you've started up your nonprofit, I know that social services are largely funded by the government. Okay. Up to 95% government funded for some organizations. So if knowing that model, I have information that I need to use to advance my organization, right? Well, right off the bat, I can tell you that a nonprofit is rarely eligible for government funding younger than 3 years. Okay? The public funding want to see evidence that you can deliver what you said you're going to do. So you're going to look at that, and as a growing expert, you're going to say, okay, I'm not going to get any government grants for the first 3 years of business. I've got enough for my friends and family to start up. How am I going to build this donor base? What other avenues do I have? Should I have an event? Should I write grants to private foundations? And that's why we do fundraising readiness and grant readiness in the last 2 sessions, right? What does it take to be ready for that stuff? Building a fundraising program, the second bullet, or becoming grant eligible takes time and the establishing of credibility, okay? Donors want to see that they're investing in a worthwhile and a successful, if you will, successful in quotes, not financially successful, but impacting the community successful organization. They want you to take good care of their money and use it wisely and use it to do what you said you would in the way that helps them, that makes a difference in the community. And you've got to be able to demonstrate this. All right. Like I said already, count on family and friends to support you while you get your team fundraising off the ground. And there's some other alternatives that we'll talk about in fundraising readiness in 2 weeks. What are the startup costs? Okay. You need to pay for those filings we talked about. You got to get a business license. You've got to incorporate in city and state, or at state and federal level if you choose to do that. You may need a facility. You'll need infrastructure, computers and printers, depending, of course, on how you're set up. You'll need supplies to carry out your mission. I don't know, for a homeless shelter, you need a building, you need beds, you need sheets, you need to be able to pay for the water bill, for showers and soap and, all kinds of things. And then sometimes you need special permits, like if you're going into childcare or healthcare, you need to dot those I's and cross those T's to make sure that you're in compliance. Makes sense? Everybody's startup costs are different, just like most nonprofits are different. That's when you get out and talk to your colleagues in the field and say, okay, what do I really need to start up? What did you guys have? What did you wish you'd known then? That kind of thing. Sustainability we've touched on. Where will I get startup funding, but also operational funding to continue? There are many sources of nonprofit revenue, like I said. Earned and contributed. Earned revenue, you have to have a community that can afford to pay for some part of your services, all right? So some examples of earned revenue are healthcare, education, and the arts. All right. Some of them some of their work, I should say, is targeted towards people that can afford to pay for part of what they do. Now, usually a lot of that is also offset by contributions. So, you know, it can be a complex model, but there is earned income in for nonprofits and contributed donations and grants, events, plan giving. There are many avenues for that as well. We'll talk about more when we get to fundraising preparedness. Be realistic about how you will manage day-to-day activities and continue to attract revenue into, sorry about that typo, into the future. And this is kind of coming back to once you're off the ground, fundraising isn't going to do itself, right? You need somebody to help you. You need volunteers or board members or paid. If you can come up with the money to pay a consultant firm or whatever, it's a good investment if you get a good one, and someone will help you while you get your shelter or your school or your 4th of July event off the ground. Does that make sense? You don't, unfortunately, usually you don't have a luxury of abandoning all the administrative things for programming. You've got to do both. Okay, questions yet? Okay. Showing impact. We talked about this a little too. How will this newly formed nonprofit demonstrate its impact? So they're going to want to know results. Funders want to know, how did you do in your first year? Did you reach the community that was intended? Did you get the results that you intended? So obviously you have to plan how you will measure and demonstrate the outcomes of your work from the beginning. What are your goals? Erica, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. What is the goal for your 4th of July event?
Oh my God. My goal is to serve those that are less fortunate,
Okay.
provide them food and resources, and also honoring my mom. So I have to put in there too. So yes.
Sure. Okay. So I am picking on you. What changed?
Go ahead. I don't mind. I could take it because I don't have all the answers. That's why I'm here. So
well, exactly. And that's why we're having this conversation.
Mhm.
So how will you, what change do you want to see in their lives as a result of your event? Because that's our goal, right? To change
Right.
people's lives for the better. So
Right.
will it be that they had a nice meal, that they connected with other low-income folks?
That the goal is that they won't be there next year. So providing the resources and how to help them to survive and to get what they need to live. So far less is if it's necessary for a job, or
Okay.
if it's education, or if it's a trade or something like that, or maybe even help with housing.
Yeah.
Those are some of the goals that, you know what, when we have it next year, I won't see you next year in the line, possibly see you helping and volunteering.
There you go. So you, when you start your nonprofit, would need to figure out a way to measure that. You unfortunately won't be able to use the simple measure of did they show up in year 2, because they could have moved out of state, they could be dead,
Could have passed away. Yeah.
they could, so yeah, that would
Didn't get up that morning to get in line. Right.
So that would be part of how you start to plan how to measure that. And you would maybe want to follow your folks across the year and, ask them to check in or do a survey at certain points and say, hey, how you doing? Have you found a job? Da, da, da. The point here, of course, is you need to figure that out. So at the end of year 1, you can say to your potential donors, to the public, to anyone who cares, really, yes, we managed to help 50 people land jobs, and we helped another 25 get permanent housing. Whatever your goals happen to be, you need to figure out a way to report on that. And I'm talking to all of you, of course. Erica's just being picked on because she can take it. You need to be able to figure out a way that you can legitimately report, this is how we changed people's lives, and this is how we measured it, and these are the results we got. All right? Start it from the beginning, folks, okay? I mean, a lot of people, another thing I've seen so much in my life is that folks think, well, just doing the work is enough, right? It should be enough. We should just be able to put a performance on the stage, and people get inspired and they get out of the house and it's in its own sake. Well, unfortunately, funders don't care. They want to know how things changed for the people in the audience, how things changed for the people you're serving. And they need you to be able to prove it, okay? So if you start from day one thinking about that, you're going to have yourself in a really awesome position to go forward, to raise money and grow. Questions about this? Performance measurement in nonprofits is hard. I'm not going to pretend it's not. It often requires, some things that are kind of intangible, right? If you're a mental health organization, well, how do we know that, our patient X is better off than they were when they came to us? Do they spend less days in bed? Do they not hear voices anymore? How do you measure that? I mean, it's not easy, but it is important to think about and plan to do, and educate yourself if you need to about measuring. And there are lots of webinars and classes out there and books to read. So if it seems daunting, don't worry. There are lots of resources to help you. Okay. Questions before we go on? I think we're coming close to the end. All right. What are the alternatives to forming a charitable 501c3 organization? All right. You've listened to this and you're like, I'm not sure that it's going to work for me, or maybe not now, or, this isn't the right time, or whatever. You can obviously join an existing effort or nonprofit as a staff member, as a volunteer, as a community partner. Maybe you have some connections and resources that a nonprofit that you care about and want to get involved with would benefit from. Call them up. Most of them, if they will at least talk to you, and consider your proposal. Form a chapter. This is when you were talking about a national nonprofit, for example, right? So if you want to help people with cancer, you might consider forming a chapter of the American Cancer Society in Renton, Renton has one, begging your pardon, in Black Diamond, I don't know, whatever community that does not have one, rather than start going at it on your own and starting your own nonprofit that deals with cancer. Does that make sense to y'all? Find a fiscal sponsor. A fiscal sponsor is also known as an umbrella organization, and we went over this a little bit earlier. They use their 501c3 to provide an umbrella, in quotation marks, to you, so that through them you can receive donations and grants, and the umbrella organization provides the tax deductibility for the donor. And there's ranges of fiscal sponsor services, all the way from just providing a 501c3 for donations, all the way up to providing administrative support, marketing support, fundraising support, space, a very, very close partnership with lots of intertwining, if you will. So that's something to think about. There are a few of them in town that's what they do. And Erica.
That's a shame. You already know me. Don't they usually charge you for fiscal sponsors?
Yes, they do.
Correct. Okay.
They will charge a percentage of the transactions, for example, that Vanessa, yes. Are you raising your hand? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
At least we are working with ladies in Hispanic community, with businesswomen.
Yeah.
And we got the grants. Sorry, but because we are non-for-profit, we have a fiscal sponsor, and they charge 10%.
Okay. Yeah, I heard 15 in another presentation. Obviously,
Yeah.
it depends on the range of services they provide you and all kinds of other factors. But yeah,
Mhm.
10%, 15%, they're getting much above 20. Well,
Mm.
yeah, check it out. But that is an alternative, okay? Another alternative is to stay unincorporated. Perhaps the nature of your business is such that it won't be frequent enough that you need to set up a nonprofit. You know, I have a group of men that I know have a little band, and once a year they hold a huge barbecue in one of the band members' yard, charge people to get in, take donations at the event, and it all goes for cancer research because each of them has had prostate cancer. Okay. They don't want to incorporate because they don't have the desire or time to manage a nonprofit organization. Their business is not ongoing. They just want to do this one big event every year and give the money to, I think they give it to the Hutch. They don't, their friends and family who they invite and who pay and don't contribute don't care about getting a tax deduction. So they just aren't incorporated. And that's okay too. It kind of depends on your business model or what you intend to do. All right. Does that make sense to everybody? You can think of being a for-profit. These last two kind of go together. You can be a for-profit business or a social purpose corporation. Now, those are organizations that are set up like Tom's Shoes, for example, is a perfect one. Tom's Shoes, where if you buy a pair, they give away a pair, right? They are still a for-profit, but they get, I believe, they get either special tax consideration or some kind of benefit for the charitable part of their work. And that opens up another whole discussion about different ways you can form a business that also has social purpose intent or purpose. There are quite a few of them. Like you can have a nonprofit or a for-profit arm of a nonprofit business. For example, Fair Start. Anybody know Fair Start? They're a nonprofit that provides culinary training for people who are formerly homeless or addicts or whatever. They have a for-profit arm that is catering, and they have a coffee shop, and it's run just like a for-profit business. Okay. But the proceeds, once everybody's paid, go back into Fair Start. Does that make sense? If you go to the Fair Start coffee shop, they don't ask you to make a donation. You buy coffee like you would at Starbucks or anywhere else, and they pay their baristas and they pay for their overhead, but then everything else goes back to the nonprofit, the mothership. Does that make sense? How that could be done? It's another option. Okay. Questions on any of these alternatives? Anything flashing in the chat box? I can't even see it. No. Okay. Okay, so now we'll open it up to any general questions on anything I've said or talked about, shared, haven't shared. Did I miss anything? What are your questions?
Charles has a question here.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hi, Charles. Yes.
Oh, okay. Got you. Thank you very much for this. This has been fantastic.
Oh,
I got
good.
pages of notes. It's
Excellent.
definitely a lot of information that I need right now to pass along to my people.
That's why they pay me the big bucks, right? What's your question?
I don't like to brag. But on the startup cost, is there a set price for the filing fee for the
Yes.
for the 501c3?
Yes. I wish I knew what it was. It's not horrendous. I mean, I think it's like $150. It's not in the thousands or anything. But I guess
Okay, because I've heard different things. That's why. Okay.
Okay, yeah, it's the same for everyone, and you'll have to pay, like I said, the IRS and the Washington Secretary of State. You'll have to pay the city of Seattle to incorporate as a business and get a business license in Seattle, okay, or wherever Renton or wherever you're choosing to incorporate, just like any business would. So, you can probably count on $500 or so to get all that paperwork done. I'm overestimating it rather than underestimating the best that I can. 200.
And Angela,
200 for which one, Vanessa?
That's what I'm like, because it's gotta be.
Sorry?
$200 for which,
Oh, for the 501c3, I think that's
501c3?
$200.
Okay, there you
And,
go.
and for the business license with Washington State, it's $95.
Okay, so that gives you some idea, Charles, yes?
$200.
Okay, yeah.
So then, Angela, I believe I've heard higher costs, but that was actually to have someone else prepare the paperwork because the paperwork can be daunting.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
that is
Okay.
correct. You can hire a consultant or, you know, an attorney or whatever, and they'll do a very thorough job, but it will cost you more.
Okay, so the estimated cost we're talking about now, that's if you're doing it yourself primarily.
Yeah, that's just what you pay the public agency that's going to process your application.
Okay, thank you.
Vanessa,
Sorry. Do you have any idea how much an attorney charge to prepare the papers or the bylaws?
I do not. I would go to Communities Rising
I see,
myself.
yeah, I was thinking on that.
And if you want more information, I'm gonna send you, I can send you to, there's a consultant in our RANU group. Her name is Linda, and that's what she does. She helps new nonprofits incorporate, and
Okay.
she'll know about attorney fees. She'll know what she herself charges, right? And she's very nice and won't push you and try to sell to you. So if anyone's interested in her information, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Everybody ready to go out and start their nonprofits or do something else? Erica.
Something else.
I mean, I'm ready to start, but I know it's gonna take some time. So
Yeah,
I'm ready to
that it
get
does.
on the process. That's
That
what
it
I'm.
does.
Well, to get spread.
All right. I am going to, these are the resources that I put together for you all. Since I send this out as a PDF, it's all so that you can click on it as opposed to having to type it out, right? So that's why it's kind of funky links here. There's all kinds of stuff out there. Here's an assessment if you're ready to start your nonprofit. Here's how you do it. Going over again, is a nonprofit right for you? Startup resources and grant space is excellent. There's a whole webinar series in grant space, legal essentials, and then Council of Nonprofits, which is an excellent organization and has lots of information, has tools and resources for business planning. Someone asked about that. Okay, and you'll get all this as a part of the PDF with the slides I'm going to have sent to you. Here's my information. That's how you can contact me if you'd like to ask more questions or need help. I'm not as good as I've studied how you set up a nonprofit. I know how to do it. I've never actually done it. So if I can't help you, I can certainly refer you to someone who can. And there's my email. And I don't know what City is doing about its phones. That's why I didn't put a phone number down, because we're still working remotely. But I'm always on email, and I will get back to you as soon as I can if you want to reach out to me. Thanks for your.
And also
Yeah.
Sorry, Angela.
No problem.
Also, if you're not able to get a hold of Angela or any other, for whatever reason, please contact the chamber. We always have an avenue to Angela, as well as you could call, email here.
Yes, absolutely. The chamber is a fabulous resource for me and for all of Renton. Again, be sure to, if you're even thinking about it, be sure come check out our RANU meetings. They're the last Wednesday of the month at 9. And there's no membership fees. Nobody's going to hassle you to join or anything like that. But you'll find a real, strong, solid network of other nonprofit professionals and people who serve them. Consultants. There's a couple of folks that are nonprofit bankers. Me, who provides fundraising training. So, it's another resource that won't cost you anything but time. And speaking of time, oh yes. Sabash, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I apologize if
Yes,
not.
that's correct, Angela. So I think you're gonna give details about the meeting, but I was just curious, like, how can I join that meeting? And if you could also elaborate on that.
So it's Ranu
Mhm.
is the name of the group.
So it is not in the slide that you're going to write down in the chat
No, I'm putting
section,
in the
or-
chat. So,
Okay.
and we are the 4th Wednesday of the month at 9 o'clock.
Mhm.
Kevin, do you think we can get a link or something for our next meeting sent out to the folks that registered?
As far as like now,
Well, not at this very moment, no, but in the next week or so.
yes, somebody can absolutely do
I
that.
just want to make sure it's possible before promising anything. Yeah,
As
right
long
now
as
it's-
we have everybody's email address, we can absolutely send out the link.
I think you had to give your email address to register, correct? So we'll send that information out for anyone who wants it. And we still meet online with the pandemic. So you'd be able to get up. One of our ladies is so funny. I love Natalie. She gets on her treadmill with a cup of coffee and puts her phone in front of her. She's great. She's doing her treadmill, drinking coffee and attending the meeting. So it's pretty low key, but that doesn't mean it's not high quality, helpful information. Anything else before we go back to our Monday evenings? I've really enjoyed talking with you guys. I do this because I care about the community being served, to have all my life and people's lives being made better. Erica, you look all sheepish. What's the question?
No, it's not a question. See,
Yeah.
it's not a question. I just want to say thank you very much. I did learn a lot in the
Good.
first series, so I'm excited about the next series. So thank you. Thank
You
you.
are very welcome. I love doing this.
See.
Yeah. We will meet again on the 22nd, Thanksgiving week, before everybody really slides down the hill to the 4-day weekend. So 6:30, I will look forward to seeing you all. And thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank
It
you,
was very
Angela.
helpful.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.